Cook, thanks for joining us. You only have a handful of active cases left in Western Australia. Why are your borders still closed?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Chris. Look, the borders have been central, a very important part of Western Australians' public health management of the COVID-19 virus. Only 15% of Western Australia's case of COVID-19 have come from inside Western Australia. So the borders have been an extremely important part of keeping Western Australians safe. The Premier has made it clear that the interstate borders will be one of the last measures that we pull down, because we want to open up our economy to Western Australians in the first instance, and by keeping our borders closed, we can do more of that.
Well, let's look at it from that point of view firstly. With so few cases locally in Western Australia and your borders closed, shouldn't you be opening up much more rapidly? You went to premises being allowed to have 20 customers yesterday. Shouldn't you be able to open up pretty freely behind your closed borders?
Well, it's certainly something which we are very conscious of. We've moved earlier than other states, so we had 10 people gatherings, some time back. Yesterday we moved to 20 people being able to be served in a cafe or a pub with food. So certainly the relieving of our restrictions has been much more advanced than in other states. Look, Western Australia does have a great track record in terms of managing the COVID-19 virus, and I can understand why people are so confident now and wanting to move further. But the very important advice that we've had from the Chief Health Officer here is that we must take small measures, wait to see the response in terms of any outbreak of the disease, then take extra measures. And obviously we're very much looking forward to continuing to release the restrictions so we can enliven the Western Australian economy and bring Western Australians back to work.
But every day businesses are shut down, there's going to be more jobs lost, it's going to be harder for them to restart. You must have so many businesses shut down in Geraldton, Albany, Kalgoorlie, who have not had any trouble with any infections, yet they're still operating under these pretty severe restrictions.
Well, we now only have one active case in the whole of regional Western Australia, so that certainly underpins how successful we've been, and certainly opening up the cafes and restaurants in our regional areas as well in the metropolitan area is a very important measure. We've taken our intrastate restrictions down from 13 zones to just 4 now, and now we're obviously looking very closely at being able to relieve more of those intrastate borders, that is movement within Western Australia, to really get the economy moving.
Given what was said before we went into lockdown, not by yourself, but by other health ministers as well around the country, leaders at state and federal level around the country, the idea, of course, was to slow the rate of infection. It sounds like now, in your state and other states, we're talking about basically extinguishing all infections before we can open up the country again. Shouldn't we be opening business and society and tolerating reasonably manageable levels of infection, especially given we've boosted our health system capacity?
Well, we've certainly been very successful, so you're right there, and we've got some extremely low numbers now, which gives us a great deal of confidence to now put in place the most advanced and progressive easing of restrictions anywhere in the country. So from that perspective, we're making good advances. And we've always said, look, it doesn't matter if there are particular outbreaks, so long as we can manage that particular outbreak. So it might be 20 cases in a particular area, that if we understand the source of the infection in that particular instance, well then that won't necessarily pose a threat to the overall public health risk. So we're now in a position to move forward quite aggressively. So we're certainly more advanced than other states. The Premier and I are now looking at what extra measures we can start to ease off so we can get people back into the cafes, back into the pubs, but most importantly, people back into our tourism industry. And we understand how important that is. We've recently introduced a $14 million support package for our tourism industry. We understand they're doing it tough, and that's why we're trying to move as fast as we can, but obviously we have to do so within the medical advice that we're provided.
You're not that, with respect, and you've done a good job, I wouldn't take that away from you. Most states, all states, in fact, and the federal government have done, but you're not that far ahead of the rest of the country. South Australia's in the same situation, even slightly better. Northern Territory has no active cases. And, of course, in the other states, they've got to the stage in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, where there have been outbreaks, low levels of infection and community infection, but where outbreaks have been able to be isolated and managed. So surely under those circumstances we are in a situation where behind our closed international or our quarantined international borders we ought to be able to open up our state borders, as your opposition leader there, Liza Harvey, has suggested.
Well, look, we're certainly looking to do all those things. And as I observed, we are further advanced than every other state, certainly not than the Northern Territory. They've gone a little bit step further than us in terms of opening things up. But at the end of the day, Chris, the thing that's protected Western Australians in the context of the COVID-19 outbreak has been our borders, the hard borders that we've had in place, both internationally and within the country. And we won't compromise on those hard borders because we know these are the measures that keep Western Australians safe.
I suppose this is my key point.
Western Australian economy, but yeah, we're opening up the West Australian economy, and we're very much looking forward to joining the rest of Australia as soon as they get to the same position we are. But we're still seeing some outbreaks in Victoria. You're still seeing some outbreaks in New South Wales, and so we want to see them, I guess, continue to progress before we move to a situation where we're opening up interstate borders.
Well, Roger Cook, I suppose this is exactly my point. It has been the border, the international border, that has been the most crucial step in helping Australia out. And we have got such low levels of infections across the whole country now. It seems astounding that we've got 4 states closing off their borders. Doesn't Gladys Berejiklian, the New South Wales Premier, have a point saying we need to open up those borders because we are all protected behind the international quarantine and the infections nationwide are so low?
Well, with all due respect to the New South Wales Premier, we disagree. We know that Western Australians have been kept safe by virtue of our hard borders. That's what's allowed us to get the virus under control. That's what has allowed us to open up our economy more than just pretty much anywhere else in Australia. So we're going to continue to pursue this strategy, and at all times, Chris, we are making sure we are listening to the public health advice, the medical advice, which has guided us through this whole pandemic. And now, as we're starting to come out of the situation where we have community-based spread of the disease, we will continue to listen to that advice, the very best medical advice available, as we continue to open up our economy to get Western Australians back into the work.